All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. Um, we. I'm going to apologize in advance. I am not feeling great today. Purely physical. I've been fighting a little bit of a thing the last, actually not the last very long. It's mostly been a little bit at the end of yesterday, most of today. So if this one's a little bit off or there's some longer pauses than usual, yeah, sorry, just in advance. Sorry about that. But on the agenda tonight, what do we got? UFC on ESPN plus 116 was Saturday. Jeez, told you I am. Oof. So we'll review that. The UFC's return to Paris. It was a good night for the French. And we will preview UFC Noche UFC or whatever the order of that is. 3 this coming Saturday. They're in San Antonio. They've got an early start time, so they are really trying not to conflict with Canelo Crawford, which is wise on their part. That's a much bigger fight, and Dana White's focused more on promoting that than anything to do with the UFC. So, that's where we are. You know, eh, that's for later. Uh, I suppose I may as well just tell you. Logically, that's a Canelo pick because the amount of heroics you have to engage in to beat Canelo via decision are frankly ridiculous. The fact that his loss to Floyd Mayweather was only a majority decision is itself a giant pile of horseshit. Sorry, I shouldn't swear on that, but there was no reason for that one judge to have scored that a draw. That should have been a wide decision for Mayweather. Canelo also should have lost the first 2 Triple G fights. I didn't think he won the third, but I acknowledge the third was. I'll hear arguments on the third. I don't get up in arms over that one. First 2, Triple G got robbed. So, I mean, straight up. There's another fight of his that I thought he lost. I forget who it was. But, dude, like, look at what Dmitry Bivol had to do. He had to beat that guy by like 10 rounds in order to officially earn a win by like 8. Like he had to win 10-2 basically in order to be given a scorecard of 8-4. Wasn't one of those 7-5 too? I forget. But it's ridiculous. Boxing goes out of its way. I don't even mean this is like collusion or some kind of giant conspiracy theory. Boxing just the sort of like collective, I'd say consciousness, because that's really the wrong word, but the collective amalgamation of fan base, writers, judges, like everything that goes into making boxing, there's just some guys that it likes. And it screws over the guys that it doesn't like in favor of the guys that it likes. My example all the time of this, boxing really liked Sugar Ray Leonard. Didn't like Marvin Hagler. Hagler beat him, but boxing liked Leonard more, so he got that particular decision. Later stage career, Sugar Ray Leonard got a lot of decisions he shouldn't have. Best version of Sugar Ray Leonard is a phenomenal boxer. A lot of us who like remember a lot of his later career and whatnot, like he's gotten sort of retroactively a real bad rap because of it. And it's made people forget how good he really was when he was really good, but that's a whole other thing. Um, and boxing, like the same thing with Triple G. Boxing really likes Canelo. Boxing doesn't love Triple G. So when they fought, what happened? Yeah. Anyway, so logically, I'm rooting for Bud though, man. my bitterness about the way Canelo has conducted the last stage of his career is pretty serious too. Just blatantly ducking at least two deserving guys, refusing to fight David Benavidez, just him getting salty about losing to Dimitri Bivol, which should have been as I said, should have been a much wider decision than it was. Eh, whatever. Don't want to dwell on that too much. So that's it. There hasn't been any like concrete news. I'll talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's come out, but when it's all said and done. But for the most part, this is just going to be the fights. So sorry for the protracted intro. Anything you can do to interact with the product is always appreciated. Y'all know that. Whatever your podcast platform of choice, however you can interact with it, please do. Big thumbs up from me personally, mostly just for listening. So thank you all very much, and that's where that is. Let's jump into this, shall we? So UFC Paris, UFC on ESPN plus 116. How'd we do? 10-3, actually. That was almost 9-4. Right after the co-main event, I'd still been going back and forth on Imavov and Bahalio. I'd kind of settled at that point into, go with Bahalio. It's not going to make or break whether or not I'm net positive on the card. And my brother said, so you picked Imavov, right? And I went, I've gone back and forth, but what's your reasoning? And he said, well, I kind of got a feeling. And we talked a little bit about some of the stuff Imavov does. But the other thing, and I didn't bring this up when I previewed it last week, and it just slipped my mind. One of the perils of doing that show as late as I did. Kyle Bahalio cut weight to championship levels 2 weeks before this fight. I think it was 2 weeks. He was the backup for DDP and Chimaev. So he made championship weight to then go like 2-3 weeks later and do another weight cut into a real fight. That's just inadvisable. It was 3 weeks, right? Because I won the league before, then a blank week. Yeah, so 3 weeks, give or take. That's really inadvisable. I don't think that's the only reason Bahalio lost this fight, but being reminded of that for a while, and then again talking with my brother, who's got pretty good intuition about some of this stuff, it was enough to get me to swap over, and that worked out in my favor. So, see, what did we get right that I felt good about? What did I get wrong that I probably should have got right? Oh, minor note. We did not get the Pitbull and Keita fight. Keita missed weight. And Pitbull's like, no, I'm not messing around with that. And you know what? That's entirely within his purview. Any fighter at all, as an elder statesman like he is, he really does not want to waste his time with that. I completely understand. Look, Keita fighting at featherweight to begin with was a little bit dicey. He's been at lightweight for a bit, and that's probably a better fit. So that fight didn't happen. We also did not get Fares Ziam and Cowie Fernandez. Ziam had a death in the family. I believe it said it was his grandmother. And was replaced by Harry Hardwick, who is a featherweight champion out of Cage Warriors. General rule of thumb, this is not an exact science, but I tend to favor the guy who's been on the card when we get late notice replacements. There's occasions when I go the other direction, but since I don't have a chance to like re-record or re-express my thoughts, 8 times out of 10, give or take, I tend to just stick with the guy who's been on the card. If I don't, I usually have a reason that I will articulate when I get into why I make that choice. So I switched to Fernandez because he'd been on the card, and Hardwick does most of his fighting at other weight class. So Which of these felt good? Fakradinov felt a little good, especially when I found out that he was the underdog. Like that felt pretty good. Um, Delia felt okay. I think Delia felt okay, not great. Yeah, and then the three that I got wrong, co-main event. I don't think I was ever really gonna get that one right, but I don't know. That one bugs me a little bit because I should. That's the kind of fight I normally should get right. I think there's a lot of reasons that that one in particular I wasn't going to predict correctly, but in general, that's the kind of fight I usually have a better sense about. Didn't get Brychek over Tavares. Didn't see that one coming. Not at all. Patterson over Waters. Maybe should it. That one, I don't know. I'll talk about it when I get to it in particular, but I'm not too cheesed off about getting that one wrong. Yeah, so I can live with it. 10-3, respectable, happy with it. Year to date now 272, 88, 2 and 2, 88 and 2 with one no contest. So feeling okay. Haven't had a negative card yet this year. Knock on wood. Um, plenty. There's still a good chunk of time left for that to change, but that's where we are. All right. As for the fights themselves, a couple of things about this event. One, the French crowd, big thumbs up. They usually bring it. They've been doing that for professional wrestling when the WWE's been there. They got loud more than once on this card, so good on them for that. Good night for the French. The French went 5-0, some of which was very predictable, some of it which was not. Just be very clear about that. We set a couple of records. This event has the record now for the most TKO wins in a single event. There were 9 of them here. There's 8 others that have 8. Or excuse me, 9 other events that have 8. I read that wrong. We also tied the modern record for most finishes on the card. There were 11. Other events to hold that particular distinction: the Bisbing versus Rockhold event. Not their title fight, their first fight. That's also, what is that also? UFC Fight Night 55. That was a smaller card and had all finishes on it. Yeah, good for them. And it was 2014, mind you. Robert Whitaker got a... Yeah, that was when he beat Clint Hester. Yeah. God, I'm old. I think I covered that card. It was me or Mark, I can't remember. UFC 224 also has that number. That's Nunes and Pennington from 2018. I went the distance there. Ramazan Ameev, Gastelum and Souza. Souza probably should have won that fight. And UFC 281, which that's the first fight between Pereira and Adesanya. Went the distance there. Jackson and Arce, Kovalkiewicz and Juarez. Yeah. Other than that, all finishes. Some pretty good ones there, actually. Oh, yeah, that's when Gutierrez knocked out Frankie Edgar. That was Edgar's retirement fight, if memory serves. We also had Dustin Poirier and Michael Chandler on that card. That's a fun fight. All right, so anyway, Definitely a fair amount of action, so thumbs up to everyone. I was I was not down on this card necessarily. I just wasn't super pumped. Um, I'm gonna stand by that. Well, again, we got some good stuff out of this, but I don't know. My not being super pumped is a other thing. Anyway, main event. So those are notes about the card. Main event. Nasruddin Imavov defeats Kyle Bahalio via unanimous decision. 150-45. Understandable, but I disagree. And then 249-46. That was my scorecard. Um, I gave Bahalio the third, and I admit the first. You could make the argument. I wouldn't, but you could make it. But for the most part, this was a lot of really fast counter combinations from Imavov. His right hand was working really good. Some good body work. He kind of got away from it. Didn't throw a lot of a lot of right leg kicks. They were open stance. Bahalio did most of his work southpaw. Um, Not a lot of right kicks from Imavov. He said in his post-fight interview that something in his ankle or foot gave out. So that explains that. He actually had a really interesting bit of lead leg kicking that he did to kind of compensate. He would show either the side kick to the knee as kind of like stopping motion or range finding, as smothering any lead leg attacks from Bahalio. And then he would sort of like from a similar chamber flick it up into more of a front kick or almost an inverted roundhouse and kind of stab it into the body of Bahalio. And because Bahalio stands southpaw, that puts the liver front and center. So he's just like stabbing at that repeatedly. His right hand is really fast. Anytime they got into the pocket, more or less, he had really good combination work. Which is not to say that Bahalio was bereft of ideas or bereft of moments. He had a really nice calf kick he was throwing on the end of some of his combinations. He'd miss the punches, but in the process of shifting while punching, he'd wind up orthodox and then just chop Imavov in the lead calf. Yeah, really nice work there, actually. He kept throwing the left kick. Some of them to the body were pretty good. It just seemed like that was kind of his default, was throwing that kick. And once Imavov had a bit of a read on what to do with it, it just never became a serious weapon for him. Some of Bahalio's punching at distance was okay. The real problem for him is Bahalio works best when he's able to mix his wrestling in with his striking. If he has to do just one or the other, it doesn't quite work for him as well. Um, I'm not trying to be dismissive of his skill set, um, because it's good. In fact, I think it's better than he showed here. There's reasons why he struggled here. Some of which are that, some of which he said after the fight, like he couldn't find his adrenaline in this fight, and two weight cuts in that close proximity will do that. It will weight cutting like this does a serious number on your endocrine system. I mean, a serious number. Um, One of the things that really gets affected by a weight cut, for example, is your testosterone. It will basically bottom out when you're cutting weight. So I'm not surprised if he cutting weight twice in that proximity to each other did affect. I don't know how much of it is literally adrenaline, or if he, but the sensation he's describing is associated with that and a few other hormones and all that stuff. And wrecking your body with two weight cuts in close proximity is going to affect that stuff. So I'm sure that didn't, help him. I think even at his best, he was going to struggle here. But his overall game, is really reliant on being able to blend a few different things together. And he's not alone in this. This is a very kind of slightly more modern approach to MMA. But one of the downsides to that approach is that if any of the individual components that you have to blend together are found seriously wanting, suddenly everything else becomes really predictable. easier to work with. Frankie Edgar had this problem too, by the way. If you got someone who could definitively stop Frankie's wrestling, his striking is no longer as dangerous. It's no longer as threatening. And his game kind of, I mean, fell apart's a bit strong, but it really struggled. I mean, the same thing was kind of true if you could just really shut down his striking, because if you knew how to handle his striking, a lot of his takedown setups came out of that. So really handling the striking nullified his takedowns. Similarly, if the striking was a bit more even, but you were lights out stopping his wrestling, then his striking wasn't really, none of his individual components were good enough on their own to really like be this giant force over his opponents. It was being really good at several different ones, which he was, and then the way he was able to integrate them into a overall game. Bahalio's a little bit like that. And that's not the worst thing in the world. It's a choice. But it does mean that if your takedown game never gets going, a lot of your striking offense loses some potency. And again, the reverse is kind of true as well, because he never found a lot of really sustained success on the feet. He had moments, to be sure, but his lack of sustained offense on the feet never really opened up the wrestling. And then because the wrestling was never really opened up, the striking never really kind of got, the whole thing doesn't really come together the way that it needed to. Imovov's defensive wrestling is interesting to me. I don't know if part of his read here was specifically being open stance opposite Bahalio, but he did a little bit of down blocking, but anytime Bahalio kind of got after a leg, usually a single leg, because that's what you want to do, open stance, his underhook fighting was a little bit different. Wasn't quite the same, and it was a lot of front headlock series. Part of what you were looking for out of this kind of fight is what was shown here that would give you confidence in Nassourdine Imavov being able to beat Khamzat Chimaev. If that's one of the major considerations coming out of this, and it is, it's not the only consideration, but it's definitely one of them. I don't know that anything shown here in particular does a lot to alter my opinion of that fight. Which is not at all to say that Imavov is incapable of beating Chimaev. But who do I favor? I think it would still favor Chimaev. Imavov's wrestling is certainly not bad. But, and also, who's to say if he wouldn't use a few different strategies for takedown defense related to Chimaev as opposed to Bahalio because they wrestle differently. I'm aware that there's some there's some unknowns here. There's a few variables. I get it. But if your game plan to stop Chimaev's takedowns or to neutralize them involves a front headlock series, it's a good thing to have as part of what you do, but I would not be looking to wrap that guy's head first time he grabs me. He also shoots a lot lower. Bahalio was doing kind of the bend forward and reach for the leg, which you can do opposite stance. I'm not trying to kill Bahalio's choices here. But he was looking for a little bit more like snatch, pull backwards, and then instead of running going forward, you pull backwards and then try to change the angle. Which is a valid takedown. Like that's not a bad way to do the single leg. But it does mean that how you defend that was something Imavov was well prepared for. That's not what Chimaev does. He shoots to try and get contact and then come up on your back and then ice a lot of the clock. Not bitter about that. I say that as a matter of, look, Merab does kind of the same thing a lot of the time. If he can't keep you on the mat, his goal is to get under your arms and to get behind you and then run clock. It's an effective strategy at the moment in MMA. I may not like it, but I can't be mad at them for doing it to the extent that the rules and officiating will allow them to get away with it. It is smart. So there's that. Um, so this fight, as far as an audition to have the next title shot, the win was necessary to get towards it, but I am less convinced that he made a really strong case for he will produce the best fight with Chimaev and has the best chance of beating him. Now, he might still get it because we have to see what happens with Hernandez and DeRitter, and if that fight just sucks, then yeah, we're going with Imavov. He might get it if there's some kind of an injury related to DeRitter and Hernandez's winner. He might fight for the belt next anyway, depending on what he has to do to heal his injury. If he's going to be out for a bit and somebody else fights for the belt, and no matter who wins coming out of that, Imavov might be in position to say, hey, I still got next. There's circumstances wherein he does still get a title shot next. But if we're just assuming that, this fight and then DeRitter and Hernandez goes off normally, if Anthony Hernandez does to Rainier DeRitter kind of what he did to the last guy, or the guy before that, the Allen fight was a little bit iffier. But if he kind of just does what he's been doing, they're going to give it a typical Hernandez win over in his normal style over Rainier DeRitter at this point, I think would push Hernandez above Imavov in the likelihood of getting the next title shot. Just saying that. So a little bit of wait and see going on for Imavov. It's next for Caio Borralho. It's a little bit of a tough one. This was his first loss in a really long time. He didn't fight badly, and he did do the backup thing for the title fight, so there's still good stuff there. The layoff was not in his favor. He'd been out of action for a while. I didn't bring it up last week, but I looked back and I'm like, man, he's been out of action for about a year. So like to see him stay a little bit more active. I kind of wouldn't hate him against the loser of DeRitter and Hernandez. I got to see how that plays out. But middleweight's in a pretty good spot. There are definitely options for him, and we'll see if he's able to get back on the horse. I still think he's got a decent upside for the division. He's not an old guy. He's clearly got ability, but the layoff, the weight cuts in close proximity, and Imavov being really good, just too much for the guy to overcome. Co-main event. Benoit Saint-Denis defeated Mauricio Hufi via submission, rear naked choke. Then listing it as a face crank. It's not really a face crank, but I'm not going to fight with the editors on Wiki. Look, a face crank is something that also affects the neck and is purely pain compliance. A choke that's over the jaw can still choke you. It looks different because instead of being under the chin and going right across the relevant blood vessels, you get over the chin, but you apply enough, you leverage the jaw down and back, and the mandible is actually what compresses the blood vessels. So it's still a choke. Just doesn't look the same. But this was definitely more of a choke than a crank, but I'm not gonna fight over it with some random wiki editor. Tough loss for Hoofy. Really struggled to get going in this one. Couple of things I should have paid more attention to in my analysis before the fight. Benoit Saint-Denis' defense is still not good, but he's willing to just keep wading forward. And in order to punish his bad defense, You kind of have to be willing to engage in the pocket with him a little bit. You have to be a bit more of a combination striker. There's just things you have to be able to do to capitalize on that vulnerability given BSD's fighting style. It's still a giant vulnerability. His defense still was not all that great here, but his pressure, a few of his early kicks actually seemed to bother Hoofy. But pressure, good wrestling, and Hoofy being more of a real likes to fight at really long range, likes to be super dynamic, but does a lot of like sniping rather than combination work. The way Hoofy fights and the way BSD fights was always going to be a little bit of a tough matchup for Hoofy. I kind of just thought that he'd be able to land a bit more often, but he was a little gun shy here. And in some cases, that's a little bit understandable. Um, Really nice restorative win for BSD. Afterwards, he said he wants to fight keep fighting ranked guys. Did he have a name? Somebody here called out someone specific, and I thought it was fair. Um, who was? Somebody called out Neil Magny. Who was that? Was it Sola? No, it was Patterson. Yeah, Patterson called out Neil Magny. I actually think that fight makes a lot of sense. He might not have had a specific name, but he still wants to stay active. Still wants to keep fighting ranked lightweights. Really important win for him here. I don't know that it showed me anything I didn't already know about him, and I don't know that this really showed that I think he's been working on some of the holes in his game. I don't need the man to turn into some defensive savant. I find that deeply unlikely. But there's still things you can do. What he did seem to have done here was really refined his fighting style relative to his opponent and actually like had a really solid uh, game plan, a really solid tactical approach, and it paid serious dividends for him. So really nice, really restorative win, more so than his last fight, which he won, but his defense still looked really, really bad when he fought Kyle Prepolek. So for Hoofy, some people have been saying, oh, he got fraud checked. That's a bit much. Look, he took a step up in class, pretty big one actually, and elements of his game were audited and found wanting. That doesn't mean you're a fraud, okay? Seriously, that term gets way overused. There's a world of difference between someone kind of fluking their way through things and what he had done. The man wheel kicked King Green into unconsciousness. Look, a successful wheel kick might not be the highest percentage technique, but it's not a fluke. It's not dumb luck. He wasn't really ready for this level. He wasn't really ready for a rugged, physically strong guy to kind of get in his face, throw the kind of offense that really stifles Hoofy's ability or desire to engage offensively on his own. And yeah, look, everybody's got losses like this, pretty much. The next fight will be more telling if this was like a serious, deconstruction or dismantling of his ability. But I saw some guys being like, oh, Hoofy might be second best guy coming out of the fighting nerds. I was never that guy. Um, I liked what I saw out of him, but I liked it the way I like what I see out of a lot of talented guys fighting unranked opponents. You need a slightly different skill set or slightly different application of your skill set when you get to a certain level. That's what he found out here. Whether or not he can make the necessary adjustments to prove that this was a setback but not a crippling or derailing loss, that remains to be seen. But because BSD just gave a pretty decent blueprint for attacking this guy. Whether or not too many other people can follow it, or whether or not Hoofy figures out how to address some of the issues, that remains to be seen. I'd like to see Hoofy fight another guy who's going to do not the same level that BSD's capable of, but give him somebody who's a good wrestler who's willing to like kind of try similar things. I would send him back to unranked fighters. It's lightweight. You have a lot of very, very talented guys who are unranked. You can find appropriate guys for him to fight. But this was just took the step up, wasn't ready for it. Until he completely falls apart again, I'm not willing to say, derailed career or found to be fraudulent. Light heavyweight next, Modestas Bukauskas defeated Paul Craig via knockout elbow. 5 minutes of round one. Brutal elbow on the ground from Bukauskas put Craig out. He got some serious leverage into that thing. Good win for Bukauskas overall. Paul Craig retired. The man had a respectable career, needs to be said. So he's still the only guy that beat Magomed Ankalaev. So there's definitely something to be said for that. Bukauskas has now won 4 in a row since coming back to the UFC. Said he wants to fight someone ranked. That's very fair. That division is a wasteland, and it is not unfair for him to say, I think I've earned a shot at someone with a number attached to their name. You don't have to give him someone in the top 10, but 11 to 15, he could easily be fighting somebody in that spot next. Lightweight next, Mason Jones defeated Balaji Oki via TKO, punches, elbows, hammer fists, and whatnot, 3:18 of the second. This was a good little fight. Oki cracked Jones early, dropped him twice. Had some real offensive potency going on, but couldn't find the right amount of offense to get the stoppage. And then Jones, he persevered through some serious damage. The offense that Oki put on Jones here would have put away a lot of the division. But Jones got through it. Second round, Jones started taking over towards the end of the first, actually. He got on top, dropped some nasty elbows. Second round, shucks off a takedown, gets a clinch, gets his own takedown, just better on the ground. Good win for Mason Jones. Another guy, you know what? Jones and Hoofy is not a fight I would be upset at, just for the record. That might be a bit much for Jones right now. He's only a couple of fights back into it in his second UFC tenure, but something worth thinking about. Oki, I don't think has anything to hang his head about. He threw a lot of offense out there in the first round, and as I mentioned, those same kind of flurries are going to stop a giant chunk of this division. Jones just insanely durable. So good little fight. There was no actual fight of the night. I would have given it to this one, personally. Welterweight next, Axel Sola defeated Reese McKee. This was your other fight of the night contender, I think. TKO, 202 of the third. Sola starts real well, lands some nice left hands, shows a few head kicks. McKee just kind of guts his way through it, starts throwing more combinations. McKee, for a long, tall guy, actually does pretty good, like, pocket boxing. His punching at range, mechanically at least, leaves a lot to be desired, but he uses it to close distance. And then when he gets close, has some pretty decent pocket work, offensively at least. So Sola struggles a bit the second, but third round gets back a little bit more on the offense. He had some good body work in the first that he got away from in the second, and he started up again in the third with it. And yeah, if you're ever dealing with somebody who just keeps coming forward, and you've had enough of them, sitting down on a couple of good body shots will give them some pause more often than not. So he drops McKee with a right uppercut to the soul. Really nice shot, actually. McKee kind of folds up, and the stoppage comes in shortly after. McKee wasn't thrilled with the stoppage. He was kind of starting to stand. Jones had moved like towards his back. Um, I can see why McKee was a little upset. I can also see why by the time we got to the third round in here, and the way McKee was dropped, I can understand the referee jumping in when he did. I can also, again, this was a little bit on the early side, but I don't think egregiously so. I it's it's the kind of stoppage where I can understand why the fighter's upset, even if I completely understand where the ref is coming from and tend to err with the referees in this case. So that was a good little fight. Sola normally fights at lightweight, so here's see what he does down there. Featherweight next, William Gomez defeated Robert Ruhawa. That's how they pronounce that, apparently. Um, Unanimous decision, 130-27, 229-28. That was 29-28 for Gomez. Not a whole lot here. Ruhawa has I think it was the second round he did okay, and it was second or third. I can't remember which one. Not a whole lot to this one. This ended our parade of finishes early. Because William Gomez fights are all kind of the same at this point, I think. That was the main card. On the prelims, Umar C defeated Renderson Hiberio via TKO. Elbows, punches, just kind of basic ground and pound. 442 of the first. Hiberio is not very good, and C is better than not very good. It's light heavyweight, though, so he's, better than not very good for a light heavyweight. At heavyweight, Ante Delia defeated Marcin Tybura via knockout, 2 or 3 of the first. Beating Marcin Tybura is nothing to sneeze at. Beating him by stoppage is certainly nothing to sneeze at. Look, the man he's only got 10 losses in his career to begin with. He hasn't. So Sergey Spivak caught him with an armbar. Tom Aspinall stopped him with strikes. But that's Tom Aspinall. Before that, yeah, Augusto Sakai got him with punches in 2019. So, look, beating him at all is not easy. Stopping him with strikes in the first round, I'm not at all going to compare him to Tom Aspinall, Delia. I'm just going to say that Tom Aspinall is the only guy to do that since before COVID. Or, excuse me, since before COVID, because the Sakai loss was in 19. So, it's not impossible to get to Tybura with strikes, but it's certainly not easy. So, heavyweight needs help at this point in time. Delia does seem like he's really ready to be here as well, so good for him, man. He was super emotional after the fight. He was supposed to have made his UFC debut a few years ago, but a contract dispute didn't go his way. Lightweight next, Kaue Fernandez defeated Harry Hardwick via leg kicks, 3:21 of the first. Kaue Fernandez has nasty calf kicks. He does a lot of moving. His punching remains a little bit suboptimal. The first time he fights someone who really knows how to, I mean, he's lost before in the UFC, but like, if you're gonna fight this guy, there's some stuff you can do. But if you shut down his calf kicking game, it takes away a chunk of his offense. It's a big key for him. Not the only thing he does to win, but it's a big part of it. He chopped both of Hardwick's legs to pieces. I mean, Hardwick literally couldn't walk out of the cage. They brought a wheelchair in for him because both of his legs were so screwed up. I'm more curious to see what Hardwick does at featherweight, which is his natural weight class, and Fernandez beat a guy on short notice, and I'm certainly not going to dismiss Harry Hardwick, Cage Warriors champion. When I say beat a guy on short notice, like, you beat a debutant on short notice. Hardwick's a legitimate fighter. I don't think that a fight with Ferris Zion would have gone this way. Not to say that Fernandez couldn't have had success, maybe not even couldn't have won it, but it would not have gone like this. Welterweight Sam Patterson defeated Trey Waters next with TKO punches, 301 to the first. Two really big welterweights. Sam Patterson 6'3", Trey Waters 6'5". This was largely a battle of which of these two guys can adjust to fighting someone their own size faster. Waters was taller. Patterson, I think, actually had the reach advantage. They both did a lot of the stuff they normally do and had some success. Patterson just got a little bit better about figuring out some of what Waters was doing defensively. And some of what Waters was doing defensively is really based more around like habits he has from fighting guys who are not his size. Got caught up to him in one of his exits of an exchange. Patterson cracked him with a right hand. Got the finish. Good stuff from Patterson. Middleweight Robert Brychek defeated Brad Tavares via TKO 143 of the third. Tavares was not happy with that stoppage, but I think it was... You gotta understand, if it was just that sequence of punches and the way he responded to them, I would be much more in his camp with saying, come on. But he got hurt pretty badly prior to that. He had some real struggles in this fight. So good win for Brychek. Next up at welterweight, Renat Fakhretdinov TKO'd Andreas Gustafsson 54 seconds into the first round. Gustafsson came out, looked to push the pace, looked to be super aggressive, but both guys kind of have really poor punching technique, punching mechanics. Fakhretdinov just was a little bit better. Caught him with a couple of left hands that got Gustafsson backing up, and then he flurried him against the fence. And kicking everything off, Sam Hughes defeated Sean O'Bannon via rear naked choke, 158 of the second. Bannon never got much going here, especially once they got tied up and then on the mat. Hughes just the better grappler. And that was it. So as I mentioned, there was no fight of the night. Performances went to Benoit Saint-Denis, Mason Jones, Ante Delia, and Caio Fernandez. Hard to argue any of that. I might have gone Bukowskis over... Who would I sub out? Honestly, maybe over Jones. Because, man, that elbow from Bukowskis was nice. But at that point, I'm kind of splitting hairs, and I'm not going down that road too much. So that was it. UFC on ESPN Plus 116. Full report, MMAZona411mania.com. Go give that a read if you are so inclined. I always appreciate that. You know where to find it. Okay. No, you go up there. Alrighty. That took a bit, but we're going to keep rolling along here. So this coming Saturday, September 16th, or 13th, excuse me, jeez. It's late, I'm tired. What do you want from me? September 13th at the Frost Bank Center in San Antonio, Texas, we will have UFC on ESPN Plus 117, also known as Noche UFC 3. Let me swap that here in my notes. Because if that's how they're going to promote it, then that's how I'm going to reference it. Boy, this card's had some struggles. Good grief. So we were supposed to get Rob Font and Raul Rosas Jr. on this card in the co-main event, which is not a bad fight. Rosas withdrew with a rib injury. He was replaced by David Martinez, who got bumped from fighting Carlos Vera on the same card. But Vera had withdrawn and was replaced by Quang Lee. Lee spelled L-E, so Vietnamese. L-I is more Chinese. And L-E-E tends to be the romanization of the Chinese version. Just stuff I'm sure you're thrilled that I know. if you care. Following Martinez's reassignment, Lee was matched with Santiago Luna. I think that's been changed too. Let me double check that. No, I think that. Okay, no, that's where it stands right now. Okay. Sorry, I had to double check that. Um, so that's been weird. Let's see. Yeah, we lost Edgar Chairez and Alessandro Costa. That's a shame. That would have been pretty good. Pennington pulled out of a fight with Norma Dumont. Nothing of value was lost. So, I mean, this was also supposed to be, it's originally supposed to be in like the Arena Guadalajara, but because that building is not done being built, got bumped. So it's just been a little bit up and down for this card. In fact, our curtain jerker is a tough finale. Who could possibly care? That's Rodrigo Ceziando and Danilil Dochenko. Uh, Again, who could possibly care? So, yeah, there's been some ups and downs on this one. But the main event is a really, really good fight. Jeon Silva and Diego Lopez. Uh, Really good fight here. Really good. Diego Lopez coming off of his failed title bid against Alexander Volkanovski, where Volk did Volk things. Some of Lopez's game, try not to be dismissive here. There have been a handful of fights that even though he's won, you've started to see some of the cracks. Um, some of his defense isn't great, especially when he really like decides he's throwing. If he gets going in combination, his head tends to stay on the center line, especially if you're like marching in. Volk tagged him repeatedly because of that. He's very, very offense first, which is fine for MMA. It's an offensively driven enterprise. But if you wind up on the wrong end of some of that, it is really hard to like regain ground. His grappling is still obviously super elite. His takedowns are not great. But part of that is his jiu-jitsu overall, and overall grappling is so good that he tends to be one of those, I'm going to try and make you tie up with me guys. The problem I think he's going to run into in some cases is the number of guys who are just not afraid of his striking. His striking's not bad. Please don't misunderstand me. But it's not devastating. It's not overwhelming. It's good. And in some fights against certain guys, it's very effective. Not trying to pretend it isn't. But his inability, I think, to have demonstrated a lot of the ability to force grappling on his opponents when they don't want that is something that he's going to have to deal with here. Because Jeon Silva is not someone to be trifled with in that respect. He is, 5-0 in the UFC? 16-2 overall, coming off that ninja choke over Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell has better takedowns than Diego Lopez. Now, Lopez's striking is worlds better. Lopez's overall MMA game, again, worlds better. But Bryce Mitchell does a lot of wrestling and a lot of grappling based on that. And Silva was very prepared for that. Now, as I mentioned, Lopez does a lot of the kind of hard-nosed, hard-charging striking rather than shooting from the outside. But So this is a really, really good fight. It's very well matched. It's very relevant for the division. The odds are with Silva at a level that I would not be comfortable holding personally. I would not want to be the guy sitting there going, well, if Diego Lopez wins, we have to pay out north of 2-1. Wouldn't be super comfortable with that. So take that for what it's worth. If you're looking for value, I do think you can find it on Lopez. I'm going to go with Silva. Let me asterisk this real fast. I gotta do a little bit of looking. There's a couple of Lopez fights I need to rewatch because he's not fought anyone exactly like Silva, but I watched both of their most recent fights. Again, I rewatched Silva and Mitchell, and I double checked the title fight because Lopez, again, it's not like he'd never had success against Volk. He did. But, Volkanovski is one of the all-time greats, and he is exceptional at diffusing bombs. And he was very well prepared for what Lopez brought. I don't think Silva can replicate what Volkanovski did, because Gian Silva is not Volkanovski. But I definitely think there are things that Volk exploited that Silva won't be able to exploit the same way, but could still utilize. So that's where my head is right now. That one I'm reserving the right to change my mind on as I double check a few things. So co-main event, Rob Font and David Martinez. So again, this is a replacement. This was supposed to be Font and Rosas. I would have favored Font over Rosas. I think I favor him over Martinez. David Martinez is not a bad fighter at all. In fact, the odds on this one are close enough to be respectable. Martinez is 12-1. Only one fight in the UFC, though, and a win over Simon Oliveira, who has really been struggling lately. He's got a good overall winning streak, though. 3, 6, 8? I think that's 8. Yeah. This is just a really, really big step up for him. His original opponent, I think, was probably more appropriate. Because, as I mentioned before, he was originally supposed to fight Carlos Vera and then later Kwang Lee. Much more appropriate. Font is a big ask. Not an impossible one. In fact, I kind of thought John Matsumoto maybe should have got that decision over him. But if we all kind of started thinking he was a little bit done when he had that stretch where he was 1-4. Problem is the losses were to Jose Aldo, Marlon Vera, Corey Sandhagen, and Davison Figueiredo. Like, that's a tough stretch of a guy. There's no shame in those losses. Now, he is still a little bit on the older side. He's 38. And Martinez is significantly younger than that, actually. 27. Okay. If this... Under other circumstances, I might be inclined towards looking at Martinez and going, I'm gonna ride with that because Font's gonna start falling off, especially considering this is bantamweight. However, given that Martinez got bumped into this slot under less than ideal circumstances, and that Rob Font has proven he's still pretty darn good, I'm gonna go with Font. I expect Martinez to probably acquit himself well, take experience from fighting a guy that good, and then get back to building appropriately. Lightweight next, Rafa Garcia and Jared Gordon. This is actually a good fight. Garcia has a few losses in the UFC, actually. To Nasrat Haqparast, Chris Grutzmacher, Drakkar Klose, and Grant Dawson. I'm not going to hold a couple of those against him. He's a good pretty well-rounded fighter. A little bit short for the weight class, but got that fire hydrant kind of thing going for him. And then, Jared Gordon, veteran, 21-7. So no contest in there. 37 for old Flash. Had that split decision loss to Nasrat Haqparast. I can't remember how I scored that one. He beat Mark Madsen before that. Most recently beat Thiago Moises. A lot of us were on that. All right, we kind of thought that it was getting to the point where Gordon was about ready to start aging out, or aging down, if nothing else, and he's kind of been shutting us up recently. Garcia, again, younger guy, gonna push some stuff on him. I think the odds are slightly with Gordon. Yeah, 2-1, minus, geez, someplace almost minus 300. Gordon looks pretty good lately. He's tough. Garcia, this is a good fight. I'm going to respect the odds on this one and go with Gordon. But if you think the bottom's about ready to kind of start dropping on him, getting 2-1 on Garcia, not the worst idea in the world. Okay. Next up, Kelvin Gastelum and Dustin Stoltzfus. This is a middleweight. I don't know what we're doing with Kelvin Gastelum anymore. He's only 33, for crying out loud. But he's got 30 fights, and he's been in the UFC since 2013. That adds up, man. He's 2-4 in his last 6. I mean, his only wins recently, he had a 3-fight losing streak, lost the interim title to Adesanya, no shame. Lost to Darren Till, not great. Got heel hooked by Jack Hermanson in 1 round, real bad. A little over a minute, actually. He beats Ian Heinisch, good rebound. Loses to Robert Whittaker, no shame. Loses to Jared Cannonier, no real shame. Gets a decision over Chris Curtis that he should have lost. Goes back to welterweight and gets run over by Sean Brady. Stays at welterweight to fight Daniel Rodriguez and gets a win. Again, respectable if nothing else. Most recently lost to Joe Pyfer. What's Dustin Stoltzfus done lately? Lost to Nursultan Rozboyev. Beat Marc-Andre Barrio. That was a good win. Lost to Bruno Ferreira. Yeah, he's kind of been trading wins and losses recently. Golly. Stoltzfus has ability. Might just go with the odds here. Odds are with Gastelum. Yeah. He's starting to look a little shop-worn as Gastelum, but I don't think he looks completely shot yet. All right, I'll go with Gastelum, but Gastelum at middleweight is uninteresting to me. And kicking off the main card, we have Santiago Luna and Kwong Lee. So, where are you? Get thrown way down there. Did something happen to this fight? No, it should be here. There it is. Okay. Took me a minute. So Kwong Lee, 9-2. He's what, 1-2 in the UFC? Yeah. Coming off a win though. His win over Gaston Bolaños was actually real good. A lot of us were a little bit higher on Bolaños. Losses in the UFC are to Chris Gutierrez and Xiaolong. Luna undefeated, 6-0. I think this is his UFC debut. There's a lot of early finishes on Luna's record. Always makes me a little bit leery. I might go with Lee. Odds are real close, favoring Luna. Yeah, let me go with Lee. Not sure, but I think I done a lot. I haven't done exclusive favorite picking, and Lee might close the favorite anyway, so I don't know. On the prelims, Alexander Hernandez and Carlos Diego Ferreira. Not a terrible fight. Hernandez coming off a pretty good win when he beat Chase Hooper. He's in a 3-fight winning streak overall. I did not score the Hubbard fight for him, but that's just me. Ferreira, age 40, coming off a loss to Grant Dawson. Hernandez might try to replicate that, but Dawson's a real good wrestler. Kind of want to rock with old man Ferreira here, but that age gap is giving me pause. 40 at lightweight is just a big number. Odds are with Hernandez. Let me asterisk this one. For the sake of not of going with another dog that I think has a real shot, I'm gonna go with Ferreira, but I'm gonna asterisk that. I gotta rewatch that Dawson fight because I'm not sure how replicable some of that will be for Hernandez, and I need to double check that. Middleweight next, Jose Daniel Medina, and Dushko Todorovic. So Todorovic, 3-fight losing streak, had the knee injury against Christian Leroy Duncan, got TKO'd by Mansour Abdul Malik, most recently lost a decision to Zachary Reese. Not a good stretch for him. Medina is Bolivian. Not a lot of Bolivians in the UFC. 11-5. Unfortunately, a 3-fight losing streak overall. Lost on the Contender Series. Got a short notice call up to fight in the UFC anyway, because that's kind of how that works. Lost to Zach Reese, then got knocked out by Ateba Gautier. He's in a rough spot. I think logically this is Todorovic, but man, his defense is bad. Because he got hurt pretty badly in his last fight before he turned it around. I would not be comfortable holding the odds that are set on this one. I'm still going to go with Todorovic because see previous comment about Medina, but he gets hit. I'm thinking of Uroš Medic. They both have poor defense, but no, Medic is the one who got hurt badly and then got dropped and then kind of rebounded. Thinking of a different guy. Still, the defense is still a problem for Todorovic, but yeah, his last fight was not the one I was just thinking about. Mistake. Lightweight next, Claudio Puelles and Joaquim Silva. Neto BJJ making his yearly appearance. He's 36. Yeah, there was a time when Silva was actually like fairly well thought of in the UFC. Problem is that was in like 2015, 16, little 17. Then he fought. So yeah, in the UFC he fought once in 15, once in 16, once in 17, twice in 18, once in 19, not at all in 20. Once in 21, once in 22. He did make 2 in 23. Then he's coming off the loss in May of 24, so he's been out for well over a year from his loss to Dakar Close. Look, man, the best version of Joaquim Silva, 8 years ago, was a really good fighter. Now, then again, Puelles has a weird fighting style. He lost to Dan Hooker. That was tough. Split decision loss to Fares Ziam. I agreed with that going to Ziam. I just don't know what to expect out of Joaquim Silva at this point. Like, how do you even begin to have a handle on that guy? Odds have this about even. I understand that. I really do. I'm going with Pues. I may regret that, but I misspelled that. There you are. I just, I don't know what I'm getting with Joaquim Silva at this point. Women's strawweight next. So Tatiana Suarez, Amanda Lemos. Suarez coming off of her really poor title effort. Lemos, 38 years old, coming off a win over Yasmin Lucindo. She had a real hard time with Virna Jandiroba and got armbarred. If you're getting armbarred by Jandiroba, who, don't get me wrong, has really good jiu-jitsu, but if you're struggling with her, you're going to struggle with Tatiana Suarez. So, picking Suarez. Let's see. Flyweight next. Jesus Aguilar and Luis Garule. You know what? That's not a terrible fight. It's not, can stand out on too many people's radar, but that's not a bad fight. Aguilar is 11-3. 3-2 in the UFC. Lost his debut to Tatsuro Taira. Won 3 in a row, coming off a loss to Rafael Estevam. No shame in either of those losses, really. Taira's still really, really good. Like, top of the division, really good. And Estevam is not a bad fighter. It's not like his wins are over scrubs. Okay, Shannon Ross, yeah. But I did agree with him beating Mateus Mendonça. And Stuart Nickel, the weight miss kind of colors the Nickel win. Garule, on the other hand, 10-1. 0-1 in the UFC, lost to Ode Osborne. Tough draw for your debut. Yeah, again, not a bad fight. Actually, not a bad fight. Probably leaning Aguilar. Yeah, my other question there was like his issues, his relationship with the scales have been iffy as well. I'm gonna go with Aguilar, but the odds like Garuli. Am I? Hmm. Let me respect the odds on this one. I don't have a strong enough opinion one way or the other. But I don't know about that one. Tempted to asterisk it, but I don't know. I reserve the right to change my mind on that one, partially because I mean I always can change my mind if someone misses weight, but there's that one I gotta see them next to each other, kind of thing. Middleweight next, Zach Reese and Cedricus Dumas. I do not pick Cedricus Dumas to win fights, so it's Zach Reese. It's not much more complicated than that. Flyweights after that, before that rather, Alessandro Costa and Alden Correa. So Costa is 14-4. 2-2 in the UFC. Lost to Amir Albazi. Okay. Beat Jimmy Flick. Okay. Lost to Steve Erceg. No shame. Beat Kevin Borjas. That was over. He's had 2 fights fall out since then. And as mentioned, he was supposed to fight Edgar Scheidrez here. Instead, he gets Correa on somewhat short notice. Correa 10-3 with a no contest. 27. His last loss was January of last year when he lost to Alberto Trujillo. Beat Jose Leon, beat Chris Okono, no contest with Paris Morin. And he's been fighting for Fury, which is a respectable promotion. Has some time in the LFA as well. I mean, I'm going with Costa, but Corey is not a bad addition to the roster. Just throwing that out there. The UFC have signed much worse than him. So, but again, relatively short notice replacement. I might have favored Shidrez actually over Costa, for whatever that's worth. Women's bantamweight next: Montserrat Rendon and Alice Pereira. So Rendon, I don't think too much of. 6-1, 1-1 in the UFC. Beat Tamiris Vidal via split decision. Lost to Daria Zlezniakova via unanimous decision. Kind of got lucky in that Melissa Mullins fight falling through. I don't think that would have gone her way. Alice Pereira, 5-0. This isn't Alex Pereira's sister, is it? Hang on. I gotta double check that actually. Yeah, this is Alex Pereira's sister. I don't think they're giving her a gimme here, to be very clear, but I don't think this is an especially grueling opponent they've set for her debut either. Odds are a little bit with Pereira. Yeah, kind of, again, reading the tea leaves, I think that's what they're after. Again, if you're struggling with Zlezniakova, then you might have some serious struggles with Pereira. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, but kicking everything off, we have the welterweight Tough 33 tournament finale, which I don't imagine too many people care about. Again, Rodrigo Ceziando, and Danilil Donchenko. So Ceziando, Cezinando, 8-1. Let's see. Former champion for BFL. All right. And Donchenko, 11-2, 4-fight winning streak. Not counting, obviously, the stuff from Tough. Former champion for Nausea. Niza? Don't know how to pronounce that one. Had a fight with one. Okay. I'm pretty much just going to go with the odds here, I think. I don't know. The odds on Tough fights are weird. The odds like Donchenko. Sure. Because I went the other way on the other one from this season. You know what? You tend to only get one of those. So, all right. That's where we are on that. So, that one needs another note for me there. Okay. So, that's where we are. Saturday, I will have coverage of that in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. So, please do stop by, say hello. I always appreciate it. And that should be done, hopefully, in time to watch Canelo Crawford. So, yeah. Busy day for combat sports, but that's not always a bad thing. All right. I mentioned I didn't really have any news that I'd seen. Some of that might be faulty memory. Some of that might be the fact that I'm very tired and it's late and I'm still, not feeling great. But I will check the old social medias and to see if anything crazy is broken. If not, we'll just do plugs and get out of here, and we'll probably have a lot more news to talk about next week for those interested in that segment. Okay, no, I don't see anything new there. So, got that wrong. Okay, there we go. All right, so plugs. Monday, I will be on triple feature actually with Mark. I think Pat will be joining us. We will be discussing three movies: Queen of the Ring, Magazine Dreams, and F1. Because we're using the month of September to kind of catch up on previous movies that we were interested in. And one of those movies that we'll be talking about is a good movie. I'll leave it to you to figure out which that is. The other two, well, we'll see. So tune in for that. I think that's my only other thing this week. Check. Thursday, no, that's not me. That's not me. No, we're good the rest of the way. Okay. So, Saturday, excuse me, Friday, WWE SmackDown. Boy, I got some heat for not being terribly impressed with this last week's SmackDown. I don't care about Seth Rollins and CM Punk, and I'm not nostalgic for AJ Lee, so that show did nothing for me. Freely admit, if those are things you're interested in, then yeah, you got a great big happy end to the show, and God bless, glad you enjoyed it. I just can only call it like I see it, and that, ugh, so many issues with that show, that episode. Anyway, so this Friday I'll be covering it again because it's what I do. Saturday the UFC card, and we will be back. We will be back here. There we go. I got there. Next week to review Noche UFC 3, and I believe, we'll be previewing UFC is 28. No, they're taking the 20th off. They are. Huh. No preview next week then. All right. Just a review. Then the 21st we'll be previewing the Australia card that is headlined by Carlos Ulberg and Dominic Reyes. What else is there? Oh, God. Why? Junior Tafo versus Ibo Aslan. Golly. Jimmy Crute and Ivan Urslan. Bleh. Justin Tafa. Bleh. Another light heavyweight fight. Good grief. Another heavyweight fight. What the? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. 4 light heavyweight fights and what, 2 heavyweights? Ugh. 6 fights at light heavyweight or heavyweight out of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. First of all, you have a 15 fight card. What the hell are you thinking? That's just too much. Stop that. Second of all, 6 of them are light heavyweight or heavyweight. That should be criminal. So much about this card should be criminal. 15 fights is too many. That many that are north of middleweight should be just a war crime. What's on this card that's good? The main event, look, light heavyweight sucking aside, the main event's relevant for the division. Much of the division is a giant wasteland. Jack Jenkins and Ramon Tavares is pretty good. Jake Matthews and Neil Magny, nah. Tom Nolan's okay. Boy, that's kind of it. Oban Elliott's fighting. Okay. There's cause for optimism around the Welsh gangster there. Still, for 15 fights, oy vey, I expect, no, that's gonna suck. All right. Well, I got a couple of weeks to hope that that card changes radically. So we'll see how that goes. All right. Until then, I'm tired and I'm not feeling great. So thank you for indulging me. Thank you for using what I do here as part of your MMA fandom and experience. Thank me for using the dulcet tones of my voice to put your children to sleep. If that's what you use this podcast for, I don't care what you use it for. Thank you all the same for all of it. I really mean that. All right, that's it for me this week. See you next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.